Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arjun, and today I'm going to be talking about correlation between music and mood. So, show of hands. How many of you actually listen to music? All of you, that's expected. So, how many of you listen to music because it makes you feel a certain way or feel a certain emotion? Most of you again. So, well, you're like me. I also listen to music for these exact reasons. And the reason is that music makes us feel emotions. It's something that we as humans choose to listen to, and it's a part of our overall lives. It lives in everything we do, we see, and of course we hear. So this idea got me thinking about how and why music makes us feel so. So how did I arrive at this idea? To understand this, I want to go back into my personal life. When I was a child, I started listening to music a lot and I started being involved in it. I took singing lessons and I took piano lessons. And recently I even learned how to play the saxophone. So with all this music in my life, I wondered about why music made me feel so happy, or why did I love doing music? That's how I realized that this topic was the right topic for me. So let me give a brief overview. Originally, my question was, how does music affect mood? After going through with this line of thought, I realized that it wouldn't get me to a proper conclusion, because the idea of how does music affect mood is very too broad, very general. Music itself is such a huge topic with so many branches of it that it's impossible to narrow it down to like one thing. So what I had to do is, of course, narrow it down. So let's do that. We know that people listen to music to change their mood because it affects them and it can manipulate them. A psychologist, Professor Nawaz Ahmed, in his study about emotional responses, stated that music has the ability to change the emotional status of people regardless of the emotion they're feeling. So we know that music has major emotional effect. But the question isn't if music has emotional effect, it's how it has emotional effect and what part of it makes it have emotional effect. So how is this possible? Well, to understand this, we must talk about how music is so special. What makes music so unique? And that's the instrumentation, the complexities in rhythm, and the use of this language. Which leads to three key aspects of music: rhythm, lyrics, and instrumentation. Based on this information, I came to my research question talking about what key aspects of music affects mood. Now, you might be saying, oh wow, he already answered this question a slide back. Rhythm, lyrics, and instrumentation. However, that is an incorrect assumption. As stated before, music is very general, it's very broad. There's a lot of branches to talk about. So, in talking about what key aspect of music affects mood, that wouldn't give me a stable conclusion. So we have to dive a little bit deeper. Which leads me to my gap. When talking about musicians or artists, some people think of artists like Michael Jackson, Sabrina Carpenter, Freddie Mercury, or even rappers like Eminem and Tupac. Yes, all of these celebrities mentioned are well-renowned artists, but the key difference is that they produce different styles of music. That's right, their songs are in different genres. People like Sabrina Carpenter are more involved with the pop genre, and musicians like James Brown and Louis Armstrong are very involved in jazz, R&B, and funk. And bands like Queen and the Beatles, of course, are involved in rock. And artists like Eminem and Tupac are involved in hip-hop. So why exactly is this significant? Because each of the three key parts that I mentioned before, rhythm, lyrics, and instrumentation, all play different roles in these genres. For example, when talking about jazz, you mentioned a lot about groove and the swing, and pop is all about the instruments and the lyrics, which also ties into hip-hop, in addition to the rhythm. And rock is all about the instruments in the background, like you have the lead guitar, the bass, and the drums giving the beat. So with all this information, my thought process came to this. With my limited knowledge of genres, I predict that people who appeal to the lyric side of music would appreciate the pop genre more, and that people who appreciate the rhythm/groove of music would appeal to jazz music more, and the people that appeal to the instrumentation/harmony of music will appreciate the rock genre. So let's talk about how I'm going to find my answers. So for my methodology, I chose survey-based research, because what better way to find out how people feel about music than to ask them themselves? And I created two forms, a consent form and a questionnaire. The consent form had basic information with their name and email and an e-signature with the terms of agreement. And then the questionnaire, I asked them about their favorite part of music and why. By favorite part, I mean one of the key aspects. You have rhythm, lyrics, or instrumentation, and what draws them. And then I asked them to pick their favorite genres and why, and I gave them a list of options. So my basic roadmap was that in January I start creating these forms so that by February I could send them out and collect the data. By March, I aim to finish collecting data and spend the entire month analyzing it to form my conclusion. So this is my consent form. I added the terms of agreement and a spot where they can sign and click I understand. And then this was the first part of the questionnaire where I asked them what aspect of music draws them to keep listening to it. And of course you have the three key parts again, lyrics, instrumental, and rhythm. And then I gave a list of genres they could select as their favorite. I told them to pick their top three. There was also an option for an other just in case they have a different genre to pick. So for my conditions, I wanted my age range to be in between 14 and 60 because I didn't want too many young people listening, filling out this survey, but I also didn't want too many old people filling out this survey. I felt like this age range was a perfect in-between in terms of how music has evolved over generations. And of course, must have consent with their name signed. And I aimed for at least 50 participants of the survey to get an accurate reading and a proper measurement. So let's talk about my data analysis. I had 64 participants in this survey with a total of 13 different genres selected. And from this data table, we can see that the most prominent aspect of music is instrumental / the harmony, with 39.1% of the people voting for it. And on the right, if you look at the bar chart, pop music is the most popular genre with a whopping 51.6% of the vote. So that must mean that people who like the pop genre listen to it because of the instrumental aspect, right? Well, not exactly. This is where we run into a little bit of a whoopsie, a conflict. My results here are way too broad for me to analyze and form a conclusion because each different aspect of music isn't separated with a single genre. There's multiple genres that were picked for a single type. So to truly understand these results, we'd have to dive even deeper. So let's narrow it down for the second time. So for my results, I arranged each different category and sorted their genres based on each different category. For example, among the people who chose rhythm / groove as their most dominant aspect, many different genres were picked, so I isolated them. In this case, the pop genre wins in terms of groove with 22.4% of the people appealing to it. Other prominent genres in this category involved R&B, hip-hop, and classical. The options that were picked the least in this case were jazz music and country music. For the lyrical aspect, pop wins again with a whopping 25% of the vote, winning by a landslide. And among the others, R&B, hip-hop, and classical, and even jazz were close runner-ups. Now for the instrumental, it was a close fight between pop and rock in a draw, with soundtrack as close runner-up. So this data states that people who appeal to the instrumental / harmony of music appreciate the rock and pop genre the most. Another major genre mentioned in this pie chart is the alternative genre, which I'll expand upon soon. And hip-hop also became a closer runner-up with 9.5% of the vote. So yes, genre does play a key factor in determining what key aspect of music affects the mood. However, my prediction was mostly refuted. Originally, I stated that jazz would be the winner for groove, but it was instead pop that was the winner. In fact, jazz was the one that was selected least. In terms of lyrics, I got this one right, because pop genre was won by a landslide with 25% of the vote. For the instrumental, I was partially correct, because I predicted that the rock genre would be the most appreciated, but both rock and pop were tied with 14.3% of the vote. Now, in this category specifically, all the genres are more evenly distributed, being the most diverse category in terms of the genres. So, among all these three charts, we noticed that pop was the most dominant, which I'll discuss in a minute in regards to my limitations and implications. The biggest problem I had with this data was that the age range was inconsistent. I either only had teens filling this out, or middle-aged adults filling this out. There was no in-between. This causes a discourse in generations because each generation was exposed to different kinds of music. And genre error, of course, because music has evolved for a long time. Since the 80s and now, music is completely different. Another big problem was my hypothesis, because it was too generalized by my limited knowledge of genres. There was a lot of deeper points about music genres that I could have delved deeper into in order to truly understand these genres and how it affected mood. So let's talk about my implications. With this knowledge, artists would be able to tailor their releases with respect to the audience's appeal, which increases the popularity in specific genres. So if I had more time, I would try and conduct my experiment with a more consistent age range and dig even deeper into studying genres. For example, the pop genre now is much different from pop in the 80s with Michael Jackson. So nowadays, you have artists like Sabrina Carpenter who produce purely pop songs, but nowadays, pop artists and rock bands tread towards the alternative genre which was mentioned before. For example, artists like Hozier. Hozier was originally a rock artist, but now he's more classified as pop, which none of these are technically true because Hozier in his albums combines aspect of pop and rock, which is the definition of the alternative genre. Then we also have bands like Arctic Monkeys, who are considered rock bands. However, they also have an aspect of pop to them, which makes them not entirely rock, which leads to the alternative genre again. As I stated before, diving deeper into not just the pop and the rock genres too, I would like to dive much deeper into jazz and R&B and funk and expand my range of genres in order to get more accurate results. Also, if I had more time, I would really like to dive deeper into the emotions felt, the types of emotions felt. I talked about mood as a generalization, so going deeper into the types of emotions felt, like happiness or sadness or excitement or even anger, would allow me to narrow down my results even more so I can get a proper conclusion and an even stronger conclusion. So now, as you go about your day and continue listening to music, I urge you to ponder about how it makes you feel and what part of it made you feel that way. Why do you keep coming back to music? What makes you drawn to it? What makes you feel so appealed towards music and the genres you listen to? All of my charts and graphs were created using Google Sheets. This is my Works Cited. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions? What were the strategies you used to gather information from the discipline-specific field? Why did you select those strategies, and what strategies did you consider and reject?
Basically, the strategies I considered was just finding a general knowledge of music first so I could delve even deeper. So I started looking up on databases, journals written by music experts and professors so I could truly understand what it's like from an expert's perspective so I could understand how that is and go along based off my research.
Excuse me.
All right, so which of the various perspectives you explored was the easiest for you to incorporate into your research, inquiry, and why?
So in terms of the perspectives among my perspectives, I thought that the psychological aspect was the easiest to touch upon because music and of course mood always has that type of big correlation, and people listen to music for a lot of reasons for mood, so I decided that touching upon the psychological aspect would be the most important in my case.
What part of the research process did you find the most difficult? Was this something you were anticipating to be difficult?
So the part of the process that I found most difficult was incorporating my methodology in my survey-based research. Originally, I wanted to include a Likert scale and quantize the specific types of emotions, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy or how sad you feel listening to these types of music. However, I realized that this would be a rough patch for me because although it quantizes music and it gives me data to present, it didn't really lead me to a strong and stable conclusion. So what I wanted to do is go deeper into the genres instead.